Hello, friends. I hope you're out wandering through nature, exploring the natural world around you. Do you enjoy writing about your wanderings? Nature journaling is an awesome, fun way to remember all the adventures you have taken and how you felt during those journeys. If you're looking for some beautiful journals to keep track of all your wanderings, I have several available on Amazon, including some guided journals for children. Start your journey in journaling by clicking on the link in the show notes. Keep exploring the nature around you and keep journaling all your wanderings. Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. I'm Paul, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas. I hope everybody got all the great gifts they wanted this year, like hiking shoes or maybe a hiking pole or I don't know, whatever you wanted that has to do with nature. Hopefully you got a lot of nature-related gifts. Anyhow, this is a great time of year to talk about winter species. And one of my favorite animals, I should say one of my favorite birds that I see in the winter time, not very often, but once in a while, is the snowy owl. And I'd like to talk a little bit about snowy owls today. If you've never seen a snowy owl, I will let you know where to spot them, hopefully. So let's get right into it. Snowy owls. The Latin name for the snowy owl is Bubo scandiacus. They are a bird of prey. And if you don't remember my past episodes with birds of prey, a bird of prey basically is a bird that is a predator. That's where the name prey comes. Predator-prey relationships. Predators are the ones who go after the prey. Prey are the unfortunate ones who get eaten by the predators. So a bird of prey is a predator. They have special tools that help them to catch, kill, and eat other animals. For instance, they have talons. Talons are an extension of the bone that comes out of the end of the toes. It's curved, very sharp, very pointed. That's so that they can grab on to the other animal. They're not claws. Don't call them claws. Claws are made up of keratin. Same thing our fingernails are made up of. Keratin is softer tissue. Claws, fingernails, they can break. Talons, they can break, but it's going to take a lot. And the reason is because they're made of bone. Like I said, an extension of the bone. Now, the talons are used to catch their prey, rip it apart. Usually, they're also using the beak for ripping and tearing. Birds of prey have a curved beak. The beak is very sharp. It's used for ripping the meat into smaller pieces. They're catching and killing animals sometimes almost as large as themselves. They can't always swallow their food whole, although owls, like the snowy owl, if they catch something small like a mouse, they can swallow it whole. Down the whole thing goes. But they actually have an internal organ inside their stomach that helps to separate the fur and the bones from the meat. And that compacts that fur and bones into a little ball called an owl pellet. So if you ever see pellets of fur and maybe some bone in it, that's an owl pellet. And there was an owl there. Not easy to find snowy owl pellets, but every once in a while you might if you're wandering through the tundra, cold, snowy weather. That's where you're going to find the pellets. But like I said, I've never found one. They're very difficult to find. Now, the other characteristic of a bird of prey is their diet. They are carnivores. They're eating just meat, and that's why they need the talons and the beak to help them catch, kill, and eat other animals. So the snowy owl. The adult males are approximately 20 to 25 inches tall from head to tail. They're almost entirely white in color. And the reason for that is where they live. They like to live in the Arctic. And I'll get to that a little more in depth in a minute. The wingspan of the males around 4 feet. But that's a pretty big bird. Their weight is somewhere around 3.5 to 5 pounds. So you're thinking, wow, this is a really large owl. And you are right. They're not very large compared to the females, though. Yeah, the females are larger. The female is about 25 to 28 inches long. Their wingspan's about 5 feet, not 4 like the male, 5 feet. And they can weigh about 6.5 pounds. So they even weigh more. So females are much larger than the males are. Now, females with most birds of prey are larger. The theory is that the female is the one who protects the young in the nest. So nature built them larger for defense against other predators, other owls, other birds of prey. So they have to be larger and stronger because of that. They're also one of the ones who do a lot of the hunting for the young, although the males do help out as well. Now the females and the young too, they have more black markings throughout their plumage. So if you ever do get a chance to see a snowy owl, there's a lot of like black streaking throughout. It's either a very young bird or it's a female. Now male and female, they both have the bright yellow eyes. Now I'll talk a little bit more about the eyes of these owls in a little while. The lifespan, around 9 to 10 years. So they do live quite a while in the wild. They have found in captivity they will live longer, and that's true with most birds of prey. A bird of prey in captivity, and by the way, before you decide you want to go out and get a snowy owl, you cannot have one as a pet, sorry. You know, they are protected under the Migratory Bird Act, so it is illegal to have an owl as a pet. I know Harry Potter had one. That's probably what made the snowy owl so popular. Harry Potter's owl, Hedwig, that was a snowy owl. But they can live 9 to 10 years. In captivity, they will live longer. They've got free food, free place to stay. They get all the medical care they need, so they will live longer in captivity. It's tough in the wild. That's why most wild animals, very short lifespans, but 9 to 10 years, that's pretty good for a bird. Habitat, where do they live? Well, they are nomads. Yeah, they're Arctic breeders in the summer. So during the summer months, they're all headed way up north into the Arctic regions where there's still snow. They like that cold weather, and that's where they breed. The migrants in the winter head south, usually in search of food. I mean, it gets pretty nasty up in the Arctic in the wintertime. I was just looking at the, I think it's, well, I'm actually not sure what it's called, but there's a website where you can actually see where Santa's home is up in the Arctic. It's right along the Arctic Circle. There's a live webcam for it. Take a look for it on YouTube. If I remember, I'll leave a link in the show notes for it. But I was watching it the other day. I like to do that this time of year just to see what Santa's up to. And they have they have several lights with these posts, and they say Arctic Circle, so you can see right where the Arctic Circle is. But they also have this big thermometer there. And the other day it was reading, now it's in Celsius, so I converted it over to Fahrenheit in my head. And the temperatures up there were minus 11 degrees Fahrenheit. that is cold. Yeah, there are probably about, I'm going to guess, maybe 50 people wandering around the area. And not one of them was without a winter jacket and a hat and gloves. Yeah, it was cold up there. I'd love to go up there sometime, but I'm not sure I want to put up with that cold. So anyhow, during the winter time, it gets nasty up in the Arctic, especially with the temperatures and the cold wind blowing. So they head further south in the wintertime, but they can stay up there if they wanted to. They are well adapted for the cold. Most people don't realize it, but feathers are better insulation than fur. Yeah, feathers actually act as better insulation. If you've ever seen a bird sitting up in a tree or at your bird feeders in the winter and they look so fat and big and you think, well, he's getting a lot of food. Well, it's actually not the food. It's the feathers. They fluff up their feathers in the wintertime to get the air underneath the feathers and between the feathers because air also acts as insulation. So the air in the feathers keeps these guys warm. So these big snowy owls, they'll look even bigger in the wintertime because they're fluffing up their feathers. They can actually withstand temperatures of negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So that day when I was watching that live camera up there at Santa's workshop, and all those people were bundled up, well, a snowy owl at negative 11 Fahrenheit, it wouldn't have bothered the snowy owl at all. No, because they can withstand temperatures of negative 40 Fahrenheit. Now, the plumage on these birds, camouflage also. That helps them survive in these Arctic regions with all the snow. Helps them to blend in. Now, you always think of camouflage as protecting an animal from predators. Well, it does that with the snowy owl, but it's also hiding them from the prey so that they can catch food. If their prey always saw them coming, oh, there's this big black object flying at me through the white snow. I can see him easily from half a mile away. I'm running. Yeah, the prey is going to get away. So they need the camouflage to hide themselves. Now, they're not the type that flies around. I know I always see around my area the red-tailed hawks doing their big circles up in the sky, searching for prey down on the ground, great eyesight. Well, the snowy owl is more of a sit-and-wait hunter. Yeah, they will sit there. Usually on a snow mound, not a lot of trees up in the Arctic. If they can find one, a perch somewhere up high, they will go up and sit on that. The one time I was out looking for snowy owls, and I did see one sitting on top of an old corn crib out in the middle of a farmer's field. And he was way up on top of that corn crib, just sitting there watching the fields. You would see his head turn every once in a while, just seeing what movement they could spot. Yeah, so they were just sitting there. And that's what they do. They sit and wait. If they're flying around all the time looking for food, they're expending a lot of energy in order to fly. And they need that energy, especially in those cold, nasty climate. So they are a sit-and-wait predator. And what are they eating? Well, primarily small mammals. Up in the Arctic, their primary diet is lemmings. Not lemons. No, they're not in the tropics. Lemmings, if you're not familiar with what a lemming is, it's a rodent. It's kind of like a rat. They're a very stocky rodent. They live up in Arctic regions. Now, a snowy owl will eat several lemmings every day. But they also eat other things like birds, sometimes fish, and other small animals as well. So how do they hunt in these tough conditions? Well, first of all, silent flight. Their feathers are specially designed to allow them to glide more than they need to flap their wings. So if they're sitting up on a high perch, they can glide for a long distance. If you're gliding, you make less sound than if you're flapping your wings. You ever hear a mourning dove take off from your bird feeders? God, those have got to be the noisiest birds in flight, at least in my opinion. But the snowy owl, and all owls, as a matter of fact, they're built with these really, they almost look like rough edges to the feathers. The feathers are designed to buffer the wind. It breaks up the wind so that if they do have to flap their wings, they're not creating a lot of wind current, which means a lot of noise. But most of the time, their wings are large compared to their body size, so they are allowed to glide for long distances. That allows them to be very silent. Another thing that helps the snowy owl to hunt and find its food is their vision. Now, I talked about the big yellow eyes. Yeah, the yellow eyes, actually, we'll get to that in a second, but the shape of the eyes is the main thing. They are cone-shaped. So it's almost like an ice cream cone. The eye gets larger as it goes back into the head. They're almost like oval-shaped with a big bulb on the end. The inside of the eye is larger. The larger eye allows them to see things better. Now, unfortunately, because they are more cone-shaped and they're not round, you can't call them eyeballs. They're more eye cones. They don't turn in the head. They're stuck in one spot. So if they need to see what's going on behind them, they can't turn their eyes. They need to turn their head. Now, when I was a kid, I was told an owl can turn their heads all the way around. Not true. They can only turn their heads about 270 degrees. The way they do that is they have 14 vertebrae in their neck, twice as many as a human. We only have 7. Now, if we turned our head 3/4 of the way around like an owl, we would actually crush the larynx, pharynx, esophagus, all those important things that help us to swallow and stay alive and breathe. Yeah, they would just be crushed in the bones. Well, an owl, the vertebrae are specially designed so that it doesn't crush anything as it turns the head. Now, sometimes it does look like the head goes all the way around, but that's just because they're turning it very slowly. And when they hit that furthest point, that 270 degrees, they can whip it around so quick that it looks like they're continuing that same motion around. But they're not. Only 270 degrees. Now, the eyes, back to the eyes, not just the shape and the size allow them to see better, but it also contains rods and cones. Our eyes contain rods and cones as well. Rods help to see better in the dark. Cones help to see more bright light, so better for close distance. Rods are better for long distance and night vision. Unfortunately, they have more rods, which means they also see less color. And I shouldn't say unfortunately. It's fortunate for them because most owls are seen at night. Now, snowy owls, think of where they live. They have 24 hours of daylight in the wintertime. So if they're up in the Arctic in the wintertime, they don't get much nighttime. So they need to see during the day. And actually, the color of an owl's eyes can give you clues about their activity patterns. Yellow eyes, like the snowy owl, are usually active during the day. It's what we call a diurnal owl. Burrowing owls are the same. They have the yellow eyes. They're active during the day. Orange eyes, like the great horned owl, They're more crepuscular, active during dawn and dusk. A dark eye, dark brown eyes or black eyes, those are the nocturnal owls, the nocturnal hunters, nighttime hunters. Those are like the barn owls, the barred owls. They are out there at night. So the yellow eyes, diurnal, daytime owls. Yes, the snowy owl is built for hunting during the day. But they still have a lot of the rods in the eye, so they can still see at nighttime if they need to. But once again, remember where they live. And that actually helps us to spot them more often because they are out during the day. And I'll talk about how to spot them at the end of the podcast. I do want to explain rods a little bit better. Because like I said, we have rods and cones in our eye. If you go out at nighttime and you're looking at the stars, something I always encourage people to do. I love watching the stars. But if you're out at nighttime and you're looking at the stars and you see a really faint one out of the corner of your eye, and then you turn to look at it and it disappears, that's because the rods are on the outside of our eyes. The cones are in the middle of our eye because we're built for being out during the daytime. An owl has rods and cones built throughout the entire eye, not just in the outside of the eye, but throughout the entire eye, and there's more rods. That allows them to see in the dark. Okay, let's talk about the hearing. If you ever look at an owl, they have what we call a facial disc. It almost looks like a big circle around their eyes. That's actually specially designed feathers to draw sounds into their ears. Their ears are located behind the eyes. It's not like our ears. We have the big funnels on the side of our head. Yeah, they stick out of the head. A dog, a coyote, they have really big, tall ears, and they go side to side. Those are funnels. They're drawing the sound in. Well, if an owl had these funnels on the side of their head, it would interfere with flight. They'd be like putting big sails on the head. Hard to fly if you have all this wind pulling against these sails. So that's why with an owl, and pretty much every bird, they only have holes in the side of their heads. Those are the ears. Now, owls, the ears are a little bit unique from other birds. The reason is because they need to pinpoint sounds. So their ears, okay, first of all, the facial disc drawing the sounds back to those holes in the side of their ears. But the ears are actually asymmetrical. What I mean by that is there's one ear lower on the head than the other. That allows the snowy owl to create a triangle with their hearing. It allows them to pinpoint where a sound is coming from. Remember where they live. Snowy regions. You're trying to find a lemming or a mouse or a rat or something that's probably burrowing underneath the snow. You can't see it. You depend a lot on your hearing. So the snowy owl is trying to figure out exactly where that sound's coming from. If it doesn't know exactly where it's coming from, it's going to have to sit there poking its talons through the snow in all these different spots until it finds that mouse. And from all the commotion, trust me, that mouse is gone. He's going to hide somewhere. So they need to figure out exactly where the sound is so that they know exactly where that lemming is. And that way they can glide down, pierce those talons through the snow, and come up with dinner. Now, the snowy owl also has a broader range of frequencies in their hearing, and that allows them also to detect the difference between the rustling of a mouse running under the snow and maybe the rustling of some leaves nearby. All of that allows them to locate the food even on a windy, noisier day, or night if you're one of the nocturnal owls. Now, another interesting thing, I wish I had this. Owls' hearing doesn't degrade with age. Yeah, their hearing stays just as good when they're young as it does when they're old. So if they're old and they're dependent on their hearing, they don't want to go deaf because they die. So their hearing does not degrade. It's an awesome thing that I wish humans would get. Yeah, I seem to have more trouble hearing things as I get older. I already talked about the head turning. That allows them to find their food because they have such large eyes. But it also helps with their camouflage. Remember, the snowy owl is white in color, helps them to blend in with the snow. But even a white-colored animal moving through the snow can be seen because it's moving. So if an owl is turning its head, it's changing its silhouette. Well, you would think it was. But with an owl, their head is more round than it is oval, like a lot of animals. You look at a bird from the side, and then you look at it from the front, the head is actually thinner side to side than it is long from front to back. And that's true with a lot of animals. Not with an owl. Their heads look round. So when they're turning their heads, and the feathers, by the way, go all the way down to the body, so it almost looks like they don't have a neck. They do. They have a pretty thin neck in there, but it's covered with feathers. As they're turning their head, it's hard to detect that they're turning their head because it blends in. So all of these things help these animals hunt and survive. Now let's talk a little bit about the nesting. I mean, they're nesting up in the Arctic. Brr, it's cold up there. Well, they do nest, not up in a tree. Once again, they're up in the Arctic tundra, so there aren't a lot of trees up there. Instead, they're a ground nester. They usually found a raised area on the terrain, and that way they can use that raised area for viewing. They don't want to be down in the trench where they are more vulnerable. They want to be up high as possible so that they can see if there's any danger coming around them. They can also see their food. Remember, they're a sit and wait hunter. So they find a raised platform, and then they will just kind of dig out a little nest in the snow, and they line it with feathers and moss. That allows for insulation between the babies and the snow, or the eggs in the snow. Remember, there's a lot of lack of building materials. Yeah, no building materials up there, so you can't build a nest out of sticks. It's just a hollowed out area of snow and line it with feathers and moss. Now the clutch size, usually between, this is kind of weird for a bird. Usually birds are like 2-3 eggs, and that includes birds of prey. But the snowy owl, the clutch size is anywhere between 3 and 11 eggs. Yeah, they have pretty large clutch sizes. Now, the size of the clutch depends on the amount of food that's available. So availability of food is a major deciding factor for a clutch size. If food, maybe it's a really lean year, you don't have a lot of lemmings around, a lot of food around, the clutch size is going to be much smaller. But if it's a banner year, you're going to get a larger clutch size. Now, some years where the food is really, really lacking, they're having a lot of trouble finding food, they may not even nest at all. Those are the bad years. Yeah. Now, both parents do help raise the chicks. They're in a tough area. Their habitat is nasty. So it's hard for one parent to raise these chicks on their own. So fortunately, the male helps the female. Yeah, both parents are very active in raising their young, whether it's gathering food for the babies or teaching them to hunt or keeping them safe. Both parents are very active in this. They are highly territorial during nesting season too. Now, I did say at the very beginning that they are basically nomads. They like to be on their own. They don't like a lot of other owls around. That's true with most birds of prey. Most birds of prey are very territorial, very reclusive. They like to be on their own. But during nesting season for the snowy owl, very territorial. They don't want anyone close to these babies. They're very protective of them. Incubation, when they're sitting on the eggs, between 31 and 33 days. Fledgling usually happens around 50 days, so not too long after they hatch. The babies will fledge the nest, but they do stay with the parents for quite a while. They learn to hunt from the parents. They learn survival techniques. It's, once again, a really rough place to live. You need to learn how to survive. Now, the snowy owl is classified worldwide as vulnerable by the International Union of Conservation in Nature, the IUCN. They're on the red list for vulnerability amongst species. Most of it is due to climate change. As the climate warms, they're losing their habitat. Remember the habitat they like. Yeah, it's melting. It's disappearing. It's getting smaller. So loss of habitat due to climate change. Also food scarcity. Food scarcity will cut down on their numbers, obviously. Habitat disruptions, unfortunately, due to oil and gas exploration in the Arctic, has disturbed the habitat of the snowy owl. So all because of our lust for oil and gas. Yeah, get an electric vehicle. Stop using oil and gas as much as you can. But that's actually harming the snowy owl. Conservation efforts are being taken mostly at this point through studies, protection of habitat. All of this is hopefully going to save the snowy owl. We can hope. Okay, but they are in trouble, mostly because of climate change. So do what you can to, make your carbon footprint as small as possible. Now, the snowy owl in some cultures is seen as either bad or good. It depends on the culture. As a matter of fact, the Cree nation of Indians believed that they protect against negative forces. Yeah, snowy owls protect against negative forces, but some cultures, they actually see them as a bad omen. They're messengers of change or bad things to come. So it depends on who you're talking to, but some cultures see them as wonderful protectors, signs of wisdom, whereas other cultures will see them as signs of bad things. So it all depends. So if you're talking about owls, just be careful who you're talking to. Now, I did say that I would tell you how to spot them. And you can, no matter where you live. Depends on the time of year, though. If you're living down in Florida in the middle of summer and you're trying to spot snowy owls, you're not going to see them, not unless you're looking on the internet. Yeah, they will not go down there in the summer, but every once in a while, there's what we call eruptions. It usually happens every several years where we have an eruption. Now, an eruption is basically a time when you get a large number of these birds migrating further than they normally would. It all depends on the fluctuation of food supply. If you have a lack of food, you need to migrate further to find food. And if you go into an area that's not too far south and there's like a lot of other snowy owls in that same area, you need to, remember they're territorial, you need to fly further south. So during some of these eruptions, some people have spotted them as far south as Florida and sometimes even further south. But usually Florida is about the furthest south they'll go. But even if it's not an eruption year, yet they will be seen in the winter time down in New York, Pennsylvania. So northern U.S., you will spot these snowy owls. I know I have spotted them several times. Back when I used to live out in the Arcade area, I would sometimes drive around in the back roads where I knew snowies were spotted before, and I would see them. I remember the first time that I saw a snowy owl in the wild. I was with a friend, and she was telling me how she always spotted them at this one farm. Every year, they would always be at this one farm, big open field, and she would always see them there. So I finally went out and tried checking out that farm, and I did not see them. So she finally told me, hey, why don't you come with me? We'll go and spot them. I can always seem to see them. So I got in her car and we went over there. We pulled over to the side of the road, and I've got my binoculars out. We're outside the car, and I'm scanning the fields. I'm looking on top of the silo where she says that sometimes they're spotted. I'm looking all over every perch I can find. I'm looking in the snow. But you got to realize, here's this white owl sitting in the snow, not easy to spot. And all of a sudden, I hear my friend behind me just giggling. And I'm like, okay, let me guess. You spotted it already? He says, oh, yeah. I spotted it a while ago. I just wanted to give you a chance to see if you could find it on your own. And I says, well, I'm trying. He says, at least give me an idea where to look. And she says, well, look up. And I look up at this top of the telephone pole that we're standing next to, and there's the snowy owl right above us watching us. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah, he was there the whole time. She saw it as we were driving up. She just wanted to see how long it would take me to figure that out. And I asked her, I says, well, why didn't he fly away when we pulled up? They're not afraid of people. Remember where they normally live. They don't see people, so they don't understand us as a threat. They don't see us as a threat. So this snowy owl was not afraid of me. It wasn't afraid of us. It wasn't afraid of the car. So this snowy owl just sat there wondering, what are these strange creatures down here, and what are they doing? So that was my first experience out in Sardinia, New York, spotting a snowy owl out in the wild. But since then, I have seen them quite a few times. For I think it was 3 or 4 years in a row, just down the road from my old house, I would see them in the open farm fields. Every once in a while, I would catch them flying across the farm field. I do have some good photographs of them flying, but they would always be in that area. I would just drive home from work, and I would look on top of the snow-covered hay bales, and I'd often spot them sitting on top of there. So there's always one owl for, like I said, 3 or 4 years in a row. Every winter, I would see it hanging around in the fields around my house. But I have also seen them at other locations. Usually it's open fields is where I spot them. Probably the strangest place I ever saw one, I was in Springville, New York, and I had just pulled into Lowe's, and I went in to grab some things, do some home repairs. And when I was walking out of the store, I noticed a snowy owl sitting in the middle of the parking lot up on top of one of the parking lot lamps, one of the street lights up there. And he just sat there, just looking around, minding his own business. And I got some good pictures of him sitting up on the lamp. He didn't care that I was there. That was probably the strangest place I ever saw one. But, I mean, it shouldn't have really been that strange because there were a lot of open fields in the area. It was farm country. So those are the types of areas you want to look. You can find them in a suburban area, in a town, but you're more likely to spot them out in open fields. Look around farm fields. If you have a hay field where they Hay, they leave the hay in the wintertime sitting out on the field. Look on top of the hay bales. Just go driving along and see if anything's flying through the field. Be careful while you're driving. Pull over to the side of the road before you start looking. But get out the binoculars. They do blend in quite well. Look on top of any man-made objects, on top of trees. They do like to be up high, but you will also see them sitting down low. Remember, they're a sit and wait hunter. So most of the time, you're not seeing them flying. You're seeing them sit there. And they do blend in well, so take a pair of binoculars and look closely. Well, we're pretty much out of time. I hope you enjoyed learning about snowy owls. Be sure to share the podcast with your other nature-loving friends so that we can learn more about the natural world together. If you'd like to support the podcast, visit the show notes for a link to my Ko-Fi page. A portion of all support will be used to plant trees. The rest help to pay to keep the podcast going. You can also support the podcast by purchasing awesome items at my online merch store. And if you like to journal your wanderings through nature, be certain to purchase a Nature Wanderer Nature Journal. All the links are in the show notes. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Stop back next week for another episode of the Nature Wanderer podcast. Our New Year's episode is next week. Have a great one and keep exploring the nature around you. Did you know that plastic is made with oil, a fossil fuel that pollutes the environment? And did you know that only about 15% of all plastic is recycled into new products? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could live our lives without plastic so that we could stop harming the planet? Well, there's a company that wants to help you do just that. Life Without Plastic sells products that will reduce or eliminate your dependence on plastic. They have a large selection from toothbrushes to food storage containers to drinking straws, all plastic free. And it's reasonably priced. So what are you waiting for? Check out all these great plastic-free products and help save the planet. Just click on the link in the show notes to find out more and to start your journey to being plastic-free.